Russia has always been Sweden's largest enemy. They have killed our people for hundreds and hundreds of years. The shelled houses, the destroyed cars, bullet holes in people's homes.
There is shelling and bombing now, Kyiv, right now.
I can continue, it's fine. Give Ukraine whatever we have. It's not only a victory for Ukraine, it's also a victory for us. Russia will never stop being a threat until Russia as a huge empire is demolished.
You're watching UATV English. My name is Anna Nytchenko. Hello and welcome. Today my guest is a big friend of Ukraine from Sweden, Emil Eneblad, president of Young Sweden Democrats. Hello and welcome.
Thank you.
You are a big friend of Ukraine. You are a politician. Now, aren't you afraid of being here in Ukraine under bombs?
Not really. I think as a politician, it is important to not only talk about issues, but also see the issues. To be honest, I felt very safe here in Kiev. I think Kiev is a very beautiful city, and you sort of forget all the terrible things that happen in this country when you see the beautiful city and the nice people that live in it. And of course, there's also a very big difference between, as you know, staying in Kiev and traveling around the country, especially to the areas where there is a lot more fighting. You get a different perspective on the reality of the war when you go eastwards than you do, for example, when just visiting Kiev. So I think it's important to see the reality as it is.
What is the most terrifying things that you've seen in Ukraine?
I would say when I first got here, the air raid alarms were a new thing to me. Of course, I've never heard actual air raid alarms before. But then we traveled eastwards and we started to realize that we were getting closer and closer to the combat front lines. And we visited a place called Konstantinia, close to Kramatorsk, where the fighting is right now. And I would say all of the destroyed houses, the destroyed buildings, the pillars of smoke on the horizon, black smoke, the smell of burnt houses, burnt families, burnt people. I would say that the reality of seeing that and also realizing that that could be my home country if Russia gets to keep on doing what they're doing terrifies me.
Did you talk to people who suffered of the war, to Ukrainians?
I would say every Ukrainian I've met suffered from the war.
What do you think? How should Russians be punished for these atrocities?
Well, the Russians that commit war crimes, of course, they need to be prosecuted and put on trial. I think the reason many of the Russians are behaving like animals is because, as far as I can understand, a lot of them are barely even real soldiers. I've heard stories about young Russians as young as 18 years old that have committed some crime in Russia, and then they get sent to the front. They are given a rifle and are told to run around in a forest for 2 weeks, and then they're sent to the front lines. And of course, if you have that quality of soldiers, first of all, a lot of Russians are going to get killed, but second of all, they're going to commit a lot of war crimes as well. I think that the way Russia should be punished is by losing the war. I think that is the most important thing. And if you look at the Russian regime, you have a president that is very old, a dictator that is very old, a country that consists of about 50% ethnic Russians, and they in turn control all of the minorities across the Russian Empire. I think that the future of Russia is not to be as big as it is today, but I think that Russia one day will crumble and fall and be divided. I think that it would be the ultimate punishment.
But how?
Well, first and foremost, by winning the war, by challenging the regime, by working to make sure that all of the peoples of Russia, not only the actual Russians, but the minorities as well, realize that this is not a way of living, this is not how it should be. They should not be living in what I think, honestly, is a shithole country run by corrupt oligarchs, sending young people into death. There is a better way, but to do that, of course, Ukraine needs to win the war, kick the Russians out of their country, but the Russians also need to wake up and realize that this is terrible what they're doing.
Let's see how many you hit. Nice.
Have you ever talked to Russians? Do you know what are they like?
I believe that in general, Russian people are so brainwashed when it comes to the Russian propaganda, when it comes to the way things are in Russia, the way things they think should be. A lot of Russians in Sweden, for example, support Putin, support the war in Ukraine. A lot of Russian people in Sweden think that Ukrainians are Nazis. And I think that's terrible. But it also comes to show the mentality of the Russian people. You know, a lot of politicians back home, they tend to talk about, oh, this is Putin's war. It's not the ordinary Russian people's war. Of course it is the ordinary Russian people's war. They support Putin. If they don't support Putin, they can overthrow him, they can kick him out of government, they can stage a rebellion or revolt, but they don't.
But propaganda, Russian propaganda works. How do you, as a politician, the person who supports Ukraine, how do you explain to your people in your country that it is really important to support Ukraine?
Well, in many different ways, of course. You know, Sweden has banned Russian propaganda. The European Union has banned Russian propaganda. I think that's very important. And this is the big challenge as a politician, because you have your values, you have your ideas. You also have a reality to pair those ideas with. And then you need to explain these ideas and the reality to your people, to your voters. That's why I think it's very important as a politician, once again, to not only talk about the issues here, not only talk about sending ammunition and landmines to Ukraine, but also come here and see what it's actually like. Because when you're in a political debate, the easiest argument to pull is, oh, you haven't been there, you don't know how it is. Well, now I have been here, now I know how it is. I've seen the blown up houses, I've seen wounded people in the streets, sad Ukrainian people who have lost loved ones. I've seen the flags at the Maidan Square. And I think it will be hard to question my testimonies when I come back home. And I think that would be a powerful weapon against Russian propaganda.
How can you describe Ukrainians?
It's always difficult to describe a people. It's usually easier to describe what a people is not. Ukrainians are not Russians. Ukrainians are not barbaric. Ukrainians do not kill innocent people. That's probably the baseline, but I would say we're very warm and friendly people, a very generous people. We were staying at a military friend of ours' place a bit away from Kiev, and he was living in this village with old Ukrainian, what do you call them, babshkas. And they would come over and give food to the soldiers, give kvass to the soldiers, kompot to the soldiers. And I think this heartwarming friendliness is beautiful. That even though these people don't have so much, they are living under war, they still share what little they have.
You know, I think that Ukraine has lots of similar values with Sweden, with Europe, because it's a country in Europe. What common? Maybe you see something common.
I see a lot of things common. First and foremost, we are both neighbors to Russia. Sweden, as you know, we've been fighting Russia since we became an independent country. Russia has pillaged, they have raped, they have burned our villages, they have killed our people for hundreds and hundreds of years. In 1709, as you know, the Battle of Poltava, our king was fighting with Ivan Mazepa to try to kick out the Russians from Ukraine. It was one of the early Ukrainian independence movements. Of course, we lost. The Swedish king and his army were thrown out of Ukraine, and Ivan Mazepa had to emigrate to Turkey. But I think throughout history, there's a long common line of a want to be free, a want to be independent. And I think that might be the most important value.
There is shelling and bombing now Kiev right now. And our colleagues say that we should go to shelter because there are lots of fighting right now. We can continue, but I must tell you this, we can continue or we can go to the shelter, as you say. I
can continue, it's fine.
Continue?
Yeah.
Okay. So speaking about the danger of Russia now in Kiev and for Sweden also.
Yeah, so Russia is our common enemy. Russia has always been Sweden's largest enemy. they will always be our largest enemy. In the same way that for Ukraine, Russia will always be the biggest threat. In the same way that for Turkey, Russia will always be the biggest threat. Because Russia is an expansionist empire. They've always wanted to conquer people, to take what other people have, to take other people's lands, to rape other people's women, to kill other people's children. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that we in the West have done for the past 30 years after the fall of the Soviet Union was to think that, oh, now the Soviet Union is gone, the Russian Empire is gone, now Russia will no longer be a problem, now Russia will no longer be a threat. There's a saying in Sweden that you can calculate it with your behind, that Russia will become a problem again. And it took 30 years, and now they're warring again. And they will continue to war, they will continue to wage war until Russia as a nation is divided and destroyed. This is my conviction.
Absolutely agree with you, but does Sweden feel now this danger from Russia?
Yeah, we do. Not, of course, as in a direct way as you do. We're a member of NATO now. That has put the fear down a bit. But still, you know, over the past 500 years, most of our wars have been with Russia. Most of the large ones have been with Russia. And I think it's part of our soul, part of our people's soul, that we know that the threat comes from the East.
Kyiv really appreciates support of Sweden. Thank you for this. Thank you for your support and for support of ordinary people. It really matters.
I think we could do more to support Ukraine. As you know, there's a problem right now in the Western Hemisphere. You have the elections in France, you have the elections in the United Kingdom, you will have the American elections. I think a lot of people are trying to exploit the war in Ukraine as a way of saying that we could use this money for ourselves instead of giving it to Ukraine. Of course, it's not about giving money to Ukraine, it's about giving weapons, artillery shells, first aid kits and so on and so forth, so that you guys can keep on fighting the good war against Russia and in the prolongation to defend the free world. This is what it's all about.
What kind of support Ukraine needs more? How do you think?
From the people I've met, everything that has to do with throwing bombs at the Russians. So drones, radar systems to protect against Russian drones, artillery shells, of course. But the only problem is not, of course, our willingness to give Ukraine things. It's also the fact that Ukraine right now uses more ammunition than all of Europe produces. So we don't produce enough ammunition to even supply Ukraine. And also this is a problem that arrived after the fall of the Soviet Union, when we thought that there will be world peace forever. Nobody will ever have to fight again. So we stopped producing ammunition, we stopped producing artillery shells, rockets, landmines, bombs. But now that when we need the bombs, there are no bombs to be found. So I think all of the Western world and America needs to start producing weapons on a scale they haven't seen since World War II.
Diplomacy or fighting on battlefield, what is more effective?
There's a saying that war is just a continuation of politics. It's politics become practical. So there's a gray area there, but I think right now the only objective should be for the total destruction of all Russian forces on Ukrainian soil. Of course, diplomacy plays a role. One day the Russian government will have to come with a white flag and say we give up. That is diplomacy, but diplomacy should come after victory, not before it.
What do politicians say about supporting Ukraine, about Russian invasion, and does this word differ from what ordinary people say?
I would say politicians generally support Ukraine, but I would say that people support Ukraine even more. And of course, you know, politicians, they have to keep in mind things as economy, budgets, calculate how much ammunition they have to defend also Sweden, and so on and so forth. But I think the general attitude of the Swedish people is just give Ukraine whatever we have, which I think is good, because you see in a lot of other countries where people are now starting to get tired of supporting Ukraine, and I think this is a shame.
You know, it's so interesting when Swedish citizens go to Ukraine, come to Ukraine, and here protect Ukraine. Caroline, Northern Grip, she's a politician. She could continue her career in Sweden and everything would be okay, but she came here and she protects Ukraine as a warrior. Can we say that now being here in Ukraine, she and the same people like her protect Europe,
Yep.
protect Sweden?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, protecting the cause of freedom against Russia is protecting the entire Western world, and what she does. And I met another Swedish volunteer yesterday, Christopher Forsbäck, who is also here fighting the Russians. What they're doing is not only fighting for Ukraine, of course, they're fighting for Sweden. Because every single tank that we destroy here in Ukraine, every single fighter jet that we shoot down from the sky, every single Russian soldier that dies on the battlefield is not only a victory for Ukraine, it's also a victory for us.
There are viewers in Sweden of our UATV channel. I would ask you to say something to your viewers, to your people, because when I'm a Ukrainian, and when I say something to Sweden people, they see and they don't really understand and realize what I'm saying. But when you say something to your people, you are from this country, you are a part of this country, I think then people really understand and realize and really believe. What could you say to your people?
I would say that first and foremost, keep on supporting Ukraine, keep on donating to the charities that help the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian militaries, but also to vote for politicians that actually want to send more ammunition, more guns, more bombs, more medical trucks to Ukraine. My party has proposed giving the entire foreign aid budget to Ukraine to buy weapons, to buy rockets, to buy tanks, instead of giving it away to Palestine or to other, failed countries in the rest of the world. Ukraine is a succeeding and growing country, a Western country that protects democracy. I think that should be our top priority and nothing else should come in the way of it.
And what do your friends, relatives say you when you go to Ukraine?
Some of them think it's scary, of course, because they see on the news rockets going into Kiev. They see videos from the battlefield and so on and so forth. I've not been to the battlefield, so that's irrelevant, and I've tried to tell them that. But I think you have to have a different perspective on life when you are in places like this, because a rocket could fall down and then it's over. But you can't do nothing about it, so there's no point in going around being afraid. And also, I've been driving on your roads here. The roads here are quite dangerous as well. So I've actually been more afraid of the roads than of the rockets.
When you come back in your country, what they ask you about your visit here?
They're going to ask me a lot. I think they're going to ask me just in general how it was and ask me to describe it. And I will tell them the exactly same thing I've told you, that Kiev is a beautiful city. I've never felt so safe in such a large city, but traveling out, seeing the misery, the shelled houses, the destroyed cars, bullet holes in people's homes, it leaves an impression on you. And it also motivates me as a Swedish politician to make sure that this never happens to my country, that Russia is destroyed before they can ever set foot on Swedish soil.
I hear many people from Sweden in Ukraine. Do you communicate to them?
Yeah, I've been talking to a few of them. And they're, of course, very happy to have me here, because usually when Swedish politicians come visit Ukraine, they take a train to Kiev, they pose for a photograph at the Maidan Square, and they say, oh, this is terrible, we need to support Ukraine, and then they go back home.
Yeah, that's all.
I think it's very important to actually see the reality of what it is, not just not having electricity for a few hours a day, but perhaps not having electricity at all, or hearing the artillery shells, or seeing the bombed and destroyed homes of families, seeing what actually is the lives of many ordinary Ukrainian people just being totally destroyed, and realizing that this is not just a war, this is not just two armies fighting each other, this is the Russians trying to move into Ukraine, destroy every single thing that they have. I've seen pictures from what's called Chasiv Yar. Yeah. I've seen the drone pictures. Everything is totally destroyed. Everything is annihilated. They're not conquering anything. Russia is not going to rebuild that city. They're not going to move in people there. They're not going to have factories and TV stations there. it's just going to be shit. Their only objective here is to destroy all things that are Ukrainian and eradicate the Ukrainian people. And I think people need to understand this part of the war, not just the fact that soldiers are shooting at each other, because it's similar to what, for example, the Nazis did to Poland in World War II. When the Polish people revolted against the Nazi government, they destroyed Warsaw. They not only destroyed Warsaw, they made it into dust. And this is different from war, I think. It's not just conquering, it's destroying. It's exterminating.
When you say Russians, when you say Putin, when you say Russia, what scares you most of all?
Of Russia?
Russia, when you just pronounce of these words.
Well, Russia, from a Swedish perspective, has always been this huge country that's always been our enemy. Russia has always been a dictatorship, whether it's been the Tsar or now Putin or Stalin or communist leaders. Russia has always been a dictatorship. The Russian people have never tasted freedom. The Russian people have never been able to live in a free country. Russia has always been a shithole country. It is a shithole country. It will always be a shithole country. People need to realize that Russia will never stop being a threat until Russia as a huge empire is demolished.
Emil, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for visiting Ukraine, for your support, for help, and for this interview.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'll remind to our viewers, it was Emil Eneblad, president of Young Sweden Democrats. It was UATV English. See you.